Hello, at 1,000 subscribers, I will make a special series of stories for you. Dodge Creek or Dusk Like a Bruise. The colors went from copper to wine, and sank toward black as if the horizon were swallowing the light whole. The town had been hammered together in a hurry, false fronts, hitch rails, and porches that dipped like tired eyelids. Wind drove mesquite dust down Main Street, lifting the hems of skirts and chasing the tails of long coats. Somewhere behind it all, a telegraph key chattered like a nervous cricket, a thin wire of civilization strung through. A country that didn't want taming. Sheriff Eli Carter watched the town breathe as he stood outside the alley where the butcher tossed offal. He had learned to look at Dodge Creek sidelong, the way you study a card sharp, never at the hands, always at the eyes. What he saw now: the livery's bay door half closed as if afraid, the crooked gallows down by the arroyo, grayed by weather, and lack of use, and the Black Horn Saloon lit up like a lantern in a mine shaft, drawing men toward it the way men always went toward danger when they called it pleasure. A boy darted from the general store with rock candy in his fist. His mother called after him, voice taut. Eli tipped his hat to her caution. The boy nearly collided with a pair of railroad men, stepping off the plank canvas coats, boot heels that bit the boards, eyes that only measured things. They laughed mean and quick, and swung their way into the Black Horn as if the saloon were an annex of their ledger books. Eli rolled the grit in his mouth and spat. The badge pinned over his heart still felt new, though it had been a year. It was a clean nickel star against sun-browned leather, 5 points and a promise he didn't always know how to keep. Men in towns like this liked to believe there was law because somebody wore one of these. But when the talk got quiet and the lamp oil got low, what Dodge Creek believed in was money. Money could make a sheriff. Money could unmake one. The Black Horn had 2 swinging doors and a chipped black steer skull nailed above them, horns spread wide. A sign underneath read, "No guns at tables." It was a joke. Everybody kept their iron. You didn't live long here without keeping it. Eli pushed through, shoulder first. Heat hit him. Lamps tossed a syrupy light across the room. A piano in the corner was losing a fight with itself, the keys never quite agreeing on a tune. Dice clicked. A dealer rasped "ante" like he was calling cattle. The floor smelled of whiskey, tobacco, and spilled men. "Sheriff," Ned Briscoe said from behind the bar. Ned wore his apron like a declaration of neutrality. He polished a glass with one eye on the mirror behind the bottles, where the whole room was reflected in warped amber. The Fero bank, the 2 crop-headed rail hands, a pair of cowpokes tracking. Alkali into hell, and the women 3 on the main floor and 4 above, leaning into the lantern, light like moths that hadn't learned. Ned. Eli set both palms on the plank, a quiet claim of space. Any trouble? There's always trouble. Ned gestured with his chin toward a corner table where a freighter with hands like shovels was talking too loud to a card dealer with hair. Slicked like a wet cat. Question is whether it wears boots or a badge tonight. Eli let that go. Ned liked to test him. Dodge Creek liked to test him. A sheriff whose skin didn't thicken quick was a man with a shallow grave. Whiskey. Eli said. Half. Ned poured it neat and stingy. Half men drink halves, he said. You planning to be clever tonight? Planning to be awake? Eli lifted the glass and took the burn like a fact. He turned just enough to put his back against the bar and the room across his front, a habit that had saved more men than prayer. His eyes traveled past the card tables, past the stage with its limp red curtain, past the rail hands arguing about a tally short on timbers. They climbed the staircase that creaked in the middle, always in the middle, and found the balcony where the women were set out like choices. It never sat right with Eli that men got to call them that Dot She was there, leaning on the rail. The other girls wore their paint like a shield. She wore it like a dare. Auburn hair, eyes set wide and silvered in the lamplight. A dress dyed the color of a bruise and cut in a way that told a man exactly how much he couldn't afford. The room called her Rosalind in murmurs. Eli had only heard the name once, but in places like this one time was enough for rumors to grow bones. She was not smiling. That's what set her apart. The others smiled until their lips ached because smiling brought stairs creaking and coins clinking. She watched instead, one finger tapping a rhythm on the rail, post tap, tap, wait. It was the rhythm of a person counting something you couldn't see. You gonna go run her off for loitering? Ned asked, voice low. Not my job, Eli said. What is? Keep drunks from killing each other. Keep sober men from killing the town. Ned made a noise that might have been a laugh and might have been sputtering in the glass. You'll need more than halves for that. Eli didn't answer. The room slid past him in a slow pan. A prospector at the end of the bar wore a strip of violet cloth around his wrist mourning. The kind a man ties on when he's lost someone and the grave is too far to visit. Eli followed the line of brass cups over the bar to the mirror again. In that wavery world he saw himself, a lean man leaning into middle years, sorrow drawing small parentheses at the corners of his mouth. A white ridge of scar cut up from his collar into beard stubble. He thought of asking Ned about the cloth, about the man, but the room shifted before he could. The saloon doors flapped, and Miss Lila March drifted in on a draft of perfume and calculation. She ran the upstairs girls, and to hear her tell it, she ran half the town besides. Her hair was piled high and caged in tortoiseshell combs. Her smile arrived before she did. Sheriff. She always put honey on the word, like he might lick it off her fingers. I was hoping you'd be gentleman enough to stop by. I'm always in here, he said, not stopping by me. She laid gloved fingers on his sleeve resting, not asking. Rings glinted. Trouble with Earl Gammon's boys again. They've been buying up time they don't intend to keep, then breaking a nose when we ask for payment. Eli glanced toward the stairs. The two rail hands were not Gammon's boys, but Gammon's boys often traveled in 2s and 3s and wore their knives the same way low and lazy on the belt, as if there were no hurry to reach them because no one would make them. He filed it. Want me to jail him? He asked. I want you to look like you might. Lila's eyes flitted over the room, taking the appearance of law, dear. Sometimes that's all a girl can buy. I don't hire out my appearances, Eli said, and the edge in his voice surprised even him. Lila's fingers cooled on his sleeve. He added softer, You can send someone from me if they lay hands on you or yours. I'll walk them to the cell and feed them beans they won't like. You say it like a promise. Leila leaned in until he could count the tiny stitches along the thumb of her glove. You never did learn some men don't fear beans, or bars. Some men fear only and only ever the ledger. If you want a quieter town, Sheriff, you start with who holds the pen. Who holds it? Whichever one smiles at you first. Lila's own smile reappeared, proof against meaning. But we both know whose name is on the check from the territorial depot, and we both know who wants a policeman less than they want a convenient accident. Names, Eli said. Oh, sweet man. I sell those upstairs, not down here. She released his sleeve and floated away, breaking a smile over a cattle buyer who had more belly than sense. The cattleman's laugh came wet and hearty, like a barrel left open in rain. The piano changed its mind and found a hymn it used to know. No one sang. The rail hands at the table near the stairs were stacking coins in tall, crooked chimneys. Eli watched as one of them, a narrow-faced fellow with a toothpick riding his lip, took a coin from the stack and palmed it under the table. The dealer saw it and did nothing. The dealer knew what everyone knew. Those two men's wages didn't stop in Dodge Creek. Their pay went uphill. Sheriff Carter? The voice came from his right, thin and papery. Amos Dodd, the telegraph operator, had edged close enough to smell of ink and stale coffee. He held a folded slip with both hands, like a parson clutching scripture. Got a wire come through for you. He tried to make his voice casual. Failed. Eli didn't move his hand off the bar. Read it. Amos's eyes skittered to the mirror. Says, your office to remit inventory and report of arms by end week stop new policy. On munitions STOP, Oversight Committee travels soon stop. Signed by the Territorial Procurement Clerk. Ned whistled without breath. They're counting. Bullets now. They're counting everything, Eli said. Amos swallowed. Oversight Committee means men. Men with hats. Men with questions. Let M bring hats, Eli said. I'll bring answers. He held out his palm for the slip. Amos placed it there carefully, as if it were hot. Eli didn't read it again. He folded it until it made a small square in his pocket. He could feel the room, watching the way animals feel a rain change. This was how it went. News entered Dodge. Creak like a cold wind, swept along the bar to the gaming tables, then climbed the stairs and caught in silk. In an hour, everybody would have their version. Eli drained his glass. Halves were enough. He pushed off the bar and let the piano slip behind him. The floorboards under his boots were worn into shallow grooves that led to the stairs, grooves men had made with the stubbornness of feet. He felt his shoulders tighten the way a man feels. His saddle cinch a ritual before a climb. The staircase complained when a big man took it. It sighed when Eli did, tolerating him. At the third step, the room shifted. A shadow detached from the faro table and flowed into his path. The narrow-faced rail hand removed his toothpick and flipped it neat into the spittoon plink. He did it without looking. People who could do things without looking were either very good or very bad at them. Evenin', Sheriff. The man's accent had prairie in it, vowels stretched like rawhide. You left your drink awful fast. Can't be healthy to rush anything in a place like this. I don't come in here for my health, Eli said. He was aware of the room becoming a hush around the piano, the sort of hush that hums. He was aware of Ned's hand going to the shotgun he kept under the bar, by habit more than intent. He was aware of Lila's face turning just enough to catch the angle of what might happen. Seems to me, the rail hand said, law ought to set an example. Sit, smile, tip. He leaned the hip against the newel post, as if posts were for leaning and not for holding the whole upstairs steady. Or at least show the courtesy of paying your respects to the floor before you go climbing into anybody's business above it. The other rail hand laughed. It had the bark of a small dog, pretending it was big. Eli let his eyes touch the man and then move off him, the way a rifle barrel touches a target and lifts. It was the small refusals that mattered here. You got a name? Eli asked. I got. Lots. Which one you want? The one your mother gave you. The rail hand's grin thinned. You think I know it? He scratched at the edge of his jaw with a thumbnail black with coal dust. They call me Finch, like the bird, 'cause I cut on rails and sing when I work. You do either of those in here, Eli said. I'll walk you out. Walk who out? Finch took a step that put him one too close. Men who'd been in camps and on crews got real comfortable with closeness. It made them feel like they were still among their own. You walking me? Or are you walking her? He cast his chin upward toward the balcony, where Rosalind leaned, watching with that patient, counting finger. Heard tell you don't pay for anything up there. Heard tell you get it free. The laugh that went through the room wasn't a laugh. It was a test balloon to see who would be brave enough to be first to think something ugly. Eli stepped one more riser up. It put him just high enough to look down into Finch's eyes without looking down on him. "Pay your tab?" he said. "Don't. Steal from the dealer. Don't put your hands on the girls. That's what I'm asking tonight. You choose how you want to be asked tomorrow." Finch's hand hovered close to his belt. Not the pistol. The knife. Eli watched the muscles in his forearm. A man drew a knife with his whole arm. He drew a pistol with a turn of the wrist. Eli waited for the arm. He didn't see it. Finch decided to laugh instead, that bark again, and step back just enough to look like he'd chosen to move. "Preacher with a pistol," Finch said. "What's this world coming to?" He tilted his head, and the other rail hand, relieved, took up the coins again, stacking them carefully. Eli filed their faces, and the way they walked back toward the table. Tomorrow had a long reach. He climbed the stairs dot at the top. The air changed. It always did. Above the spill and the shout, the hallway held the leftover quiet, the kind that gathers where people have to pretend louder than they feel. 4 doors on each side, all with their own stories, all with locks that were mostly for show. The hallway lamp smoked a little, casting a thin soot halo on the ceiling. At the far end, a window looked west, where the last rag of daylight was, caught on the teeth of the hills. Eli took that in, and then took in Rosalind taking him in. "Sheriff," she said. The word held none of Lila's honey. It was clean, a washed thing. Up close, Eli saw the freckles the paint didn't quite bully, the fine line of a scar along her hairline, the faint bruise where someone had gripped her wrist too hard. He thought of asking if he should arrest the hand that made it. He didn't. He had learned to count to how many arrests could a man make before the jail belonged to the wrong people. "Evening," he said. She tapped the rail post once more, a full stop, and then turned away from it, the silk at her shoulders catching on a splinter and pulling the slightest thread. She didn't notice. She crossed to him on cat quiet feet and stopped on the top step, forcing him to move off the stair and onto the landing so they'd be level. "You here for someone?" she asked. "Sometimes I don't know until I get here." He shrugged. "Sometimes trouble wears powder, and sometimes it wears a badge." She said it without heat, as if reciting a fact learned late and well. He felt it then, the habit of reaching for the brim of his hat and touching it when he wanted a second to think. He didn't give himself the second. "Somebody bother you?" "All sorts of somebodies." She looked over his shoulder, down at the floor, where Finch had settled and was pretending to be small. "That little bird tried to fly at me last night. I clipped his wings. You tell Lila?" "I told the man who holds his pay." She looked back at him. He smiled. "Said he'd talk. Men say that when they mean they'll forget." "Who holds his pay?" Eli asked, but she had already lifted a hand, the queen staying the rook. "You ask so many questions for a man who never says what he wants." She tilted her face, eyes narrowing, trying to get under his hat brim and leave nothing for later. "What do you want, Sheriff?" "Here, in this place where wanting is the whole business." He thought about a ranch further east where the wind set, the grass whispering, and you could ride a day and only count the hawks. He thought about a woman with a book in her lap and a patience he had not deserved. He thought about a freight wagon turned into the dry wash, wheel broken, and a boy looking at him like law could fix anything. He thought about beans on a tin plate and the way a jail smells after 2 nights of rain. He thought, and then he didn't think. "Information," he said. "Names. Rooms men go into and come out of with different faces. Work being done that doesn't belong to the town, doesn't pay it either. Something's being taken out of Dodge Creek that isn't on a train schedule, and I aim to know what." Her expression didn't change, but something in her shoulders did a lifting, a setting, recognition. "You're late," she said. "Late?" Men started disappearing 2 years ago. Not the kind who get their names in papers. The kind who don't have papers, drifters, boys, a girl or two. Her eyes brushed past him again, down the stairs, as if she knew where every mention of the word girl would land. We are what gets taken in towns like this. You hear it in the piano when the player stops, there's always a seat empty that used to be filled. Why tell me? You came anyway. She glanced at the door nearest her left shoulder and then back at him. The brass numbers were rubbed to almost nothing. Most men who want information bring coin. They tuck it under the lamp. They don't. Say the word aim like it's a tool they've used. They don't look at the floor to see where it's been patched twice and where it'll fall through a third time. They just buy a name and go. And me? You paid another way. She stepped backward, slowly, drawing him along with a gravity he didn't try to explain. The hallway held its breath. Doors had eyes and ears. All the rooms in the world did. Maybe you don't know it yet. She reached the door, turned the knob, and the latch sighed like it had been waiting. Her room was lamp-lit, and spare in the way of places lived in between moments. A washstand with a cracked mirror. A travel trunk with a bit of steamship sticker still stuck to its lid, New Orleans, curling away in faded ink. A chair near the window with a shawl draped over it carefully enough to tell him. It was the one thing here she cared about not creasing. The bed was narrow and made tight, as if the woman who used it refused to be swallowed by it. He did not step over the threshold. He put a hand on the door jamb and let his fingers feel the notch marks, their small cuts, a series of them, like a person counting days. He thought of her tapping the rail, counting, waiting. He looked at her. He kept his hat on. You paid for me, she said, voice soft but steady, a line offered not to invite, but to test. She stepped into the light, and it found every plane of her face the paint hadn't bothered to soften. Now finish it. He met her eyes. They held a surprise he couldn't. Read and a dare he could. He felt the weight of his badge again, heavier than it had ever been, as if the nickel wanted to sink through his shirt and skin to the bone underneath. His hand left the jamb and went, without asking, to his belt, not to his gun, but to the hook where his key ring hung alongside the small blade he used for rope and apples and carving slivers out of himself when wood got mean. I didn't pay, he said. Her mouth twitched, not quite a smile. That's the point. She stepped aside, creating space the way some people make favor quietly, as if space itself were something she'd earned in a way he couldn't understand yet. Come in, Sheriff. You didn't pay. You came. Let's see what that buys. What? He found underneath, under her words, under the town's paint, under the floor marked by hundreds of feet, would shatter the little faith he'd been hoarding in law and ledgers, and the idea that right could be done by men who wore the star, and nothing else. But that was for later. For now. The door's click was a small sound, but it settled heavy. Down the hall, laughter creaked through floorboards and fell away. In the room, air thinned to the smell of lamp oil and lavender soap. Rosalind moved first 2 steps to the window. A quick tug to draw the curtain tight, then a reach under the sill to flip a sliver of wood that turned in its groove. Somewhere in the wall, a peg dropped. The room grew quieter. You soundproof your life, Eli said. You don't last long. Upstairs if you don't, she answered, not turning. There's a listening knot in the third board of the hallway wainscot. Boys down at the bar like to press their eyes to it when they've paid for more whiskey than sense. I blocked it last week. Men always think they discovered something. No one else knows. Now she turned. Without the hallway's lantern, the paint on her face showed its work rouge laying claim to her cheekbones, coal making her eyes a kind of bright no one is born with. She lifted a washcloth from the bowl and began to erase. The mirror on the washstand had a crack that ran through its center like a lightning bolt, and her face fractured and reassembled with every pass of the cloth. One version of her then. Another. "You said you came for information," she said. "Then you should meet me." He stayed by the door, one shoulder against the frame, the way men lean into something when they need it to be solid. Her hands were quick and deliberate. Rouge came off first, then the sharp line around her lips, then the heavy sweep at the eyelids. Under the paint was a person it had been expensive to hide. Freckles like dust in sunlight, a mouth that showed strength before it showed softness. A small scar along the hairline, where some long-forgotten childhood lesson had left its permanent. Note: the last thing she removed was the necklace, a locket the size of a silver dollar, dull with handling. Her thumb rubbed the seam, worrying at it. The chain had made a fine groove at the base of her throat. She held the locket out as if offering something living. "Open it," she said. Eli crossed the room, careful not to jar the narrow table where the lamp flame steadied itself. The locket clicked beneath his thumbnail. Inside, a miniature portrait, ink and watercolor, done by a steady hand on cheap paper. A boy sat for it 11, maybe 12 hair combed hard, mouth set straight to prove something to whoever had. The brush, a white crescent of a scar, rode his eyebrow, the kind boys earn from the corners of the world. "My brother," Rosalind said. "Samuel Vale. Sammy to me." Eli studied the face a moment longer. "How long?" 2 years. She took the locket back with the reverence of a churchgoer reclaiming a worn Bible. It vanished under her bodice as if the skin there kept it warmer than anywhere else could. We were south, near San Angelo, working in a boarding house. Our mother died when the fever took half the county. I thought I could hold us together with washing and serving and making myself useful. I was wrong. Men came through surveying for the line. They promised boys wages, swinging picks, food, boots. They took 5 boys and left 5 coins for the woman who owned my bed and board. She told me I should be grateful. One less mouth to feed. I followed for months. New towns, new tracks, new promises. It led me here. "To the Black Horn," Eli said, flat to keep feeling from spilling. "To Dodge Creek," she corrected, and the way she said the town's name made it sound like a thing with teeth. "The Black Horn is just where the town keeps its noise. The business is not upstairs. The business is underneath." He watched her as she crossed to the trunk at the foot of the bed. The steamship sticker New Orleans had bitten hedges and a color that might once have been bold. She knelt, threw the latches, and lifted the lid. Inside, the neatness of a life. 2 dresses folded flat, stockings darned carefully, a shawl she had been careful not to crease. Beneath those, the things that did not belong to a woman working rooms, an oilskin packet tied with butcher's string and sealed with wax, a small book bound in canvas, a sheaf of brittle papers gone thin at the creases. She laid them out on the bed like cards. "This is what I've learned buying men's time with listening," she said. "Names, numbers, schedules that don't run with the depot's whistle." Eli took up the canvas-bound book. Inside, each page was ruled into columns by a hand that liked order. Date, initials, weight, notation. The notation struck him first. Not ore, not hides or grain or whiskey barrels or nails. Chain, blasting caps, salt pork by the quarter, candles by the score, and the initials, the same clusters repeating. E.G. in a cramped snarl, C.R. in a rolling hand, a tidy, practiced H that belonged to a clerk. Earl Gammon, Rosalind said when his finger rested on E.G., owns half the wagons that run nights. C.R.? Eli asked. Cass Roke. She made a small, involuntary face. One of the foremen from the old silver vein works. The mine that collapsed. They say it never reopened. Men who say that don't pay attention to the candle orders. He turned the page. The numbers were wrong for a closed shaft. These are heavy, he said, even for a lie. She smiled without humor. Lies require more equipment than the truth. He looked at the oilskin packet next. Rosalind broke the wax and unrolled it. A map emerged, the paper thin enough to hear it breathe. Lines for washes and dry creek beds, a field of hatches where the hills rose, a bold black scar where the old Silver Vein Road climbed away from town. At a notch-marked Horsehead Bluff, a second, fainter trail bent off. Someone had annotated the margins with a different hand-small, neat letters. Night path 2 men and 1 wagon. No lanterns. Twice a week. Yours? Eli asked, touching the notes. Some of it, she said. Some is from a teamster with a conscience and a loose tongue. Some is from a girl who used to work here and knows the shape of the bluff by heart. Because a man once made her sit on it and watch wagons snake by while he counted them out loud like a lullaby. Her mouth flattened. We count in this town, Sheriff. We count days. We count loads. We count who doesn't come back from a shift. She flipped again through the papers and pulled a small thing from the bottom of the pile out. Narrow brass tags stamped with SV23 and a hole drilled through one end. I found this under the back stoop last winter, she said. I thought it was a mule tag. Then I saw the same tag around a boy's ankle when the wagons rolled past the livery at dawn. Not a mule. Eli's jaw hardened. You're certain? I was certain then, she said. I am more certain now. He placed the tag on the oilskin and lined it up with a neat SV drawn on the map's margin, as if aligning symbols could force the world to admit something. His thumbs pressed line into paper until the lines meant more than ink. Why me? He asked finally, without looking up. There are other men with guns and badges within a week's ride. There are other men with guns, she said. Badges. Those I trust less than guns. No offense. Taken, he said, and meant none. You didn't pay, she said again, gentler. That's not just about money. You walked the stairs like a man going somewhere he didn't want to look like he was going, and still going anyway. Lila had words with me after you left last week. She told me you were stubborn in ways that cost. I need someone who knows the price of being stubborn and pays it anyway. Lila spoke of me? He filed that and put it next to other things he knew about Lila March. Her perfume, her bookkeeping, her habit of never letting her eyes rest on one person too long. She keeps a ledger of people, Rosalind said. You should know Lila. 'Cause not all silk and song. She has reasons. Some are mine to tell, some are not, but she won't stop this. Rosalind's finger tapped the map near Horsehead Bluff. She won't start it either. You think the mayor knows? Eli asked. Or the depot clerk? I got a wire an hour ago about munitions oversight. Men with hats. Men with questions. You think their questions are the right ones? Their questions are about bullets, not bodies, Rosalind said. Different accounting. He breathed once through his nose. The lamplight found the white ridge of scar under his stubble and laid it bare. If the silver vein is open, he said, it's illegal. If they're using bond gangs, it's a crime all our fancy papers recognize. If they've got a boy with a scar under his brow, I'll bring him out. Say it plain, she said. Say his name. Samuel Vale. Eli said. The name sat between them like warm bread on a cold table. A knock sounded. A quick coded rattle. 2, pause, 1. Rosalind was moving before Eli's hand could go to his gun. She slid the map and ledger into the trunk, dropped the brass tag into a teacup on the washstand, swept her shawl across the bed to cover the oilskin's corner, then crossed the floor and pulled open the door with a smile perfectly applied where the paint no longer was. "Lila," she said, and the honey came back into her voice so cleanly. Eli admired the craftsmanship even as his jaw set. Miss Lila March filled the doorway like a well-constructed lie lovely, clever, and hard to get around. Her eyes took the room the way a hawk takes a field in one smooth pass that misses nothing. "Rosie, sweetheart," she sang, "you forgot the towel in 3. Mr. Orville nearly died of modesty." "Forgive me," Rosalind said. "My mind wanders when the piano misses notes." Lila's gaze slid to Eli and paused. The pause said, "I like to know who is on my stairs." "Sheriff Carter," she said. "You make my place look respectable." "I try to make the town so," he answered. "So noble," she said lightly, so his ears couldn't tell whether mockery rode inside the word. She lifted her wrist and let a bracelet chime once against the door jamb. "I do hope you're not here on business. Business is what drives this town," he said. Her smile deepened a notch, no teeth. "Look at you, quoting my better lines back to me. If you must do business, Sheriff, do it soft. The floorboards complain, and some of my customers frighten at the sound of judgment." "I didn't bring any," he said. "Leave with the same." She tapped the jamb with one gloved finger, then the third board of the wainscot with a fingernail throwaway gesture, careless to anyone who didn't know. "Good night, Rosalind. Do see to Mr. Orville's modesty. He pays extra for it." When she was gone, Rosalind closed the door and leaned against it a heartbeat longer than she needed to. Eli let the breath he'd been holding go, thin through his teeth. "She knows," he said. "She knows something," Rosalind said. "She always does." They stood quiet a moment, the lamp's tiny hiss the only sound. The room seemed to resize itself now that Lila's shape was gone. "You'll need to know how to move without looking like you're moving," Rosalind said. "We don't do this with arrests in the street. We do it with laundry routes and backlots, and the timing of a cook's smoke." She crossed to the window and peeked past the curtain, then pointed with her chin. "Out that way, there's a narrow stair down to the alley. Barrel of ashes at the bottom. Look like you're telling me you'll be back tomorrow, and you're too cheap to buy me a drink tonight. Men will hear it and judge you, and they won't think past their judgment. They rarely do." "You've been running a war from a rented room," he said. "Running?" She shook her head. "Setting a table. I've been waiting for somebody to sit down and eat, then tell me where to be and when." She came back to the bed and, with a careful finger, slid the shawl aside to reveal the oilskin's corner. Her nail tapped a place on the map near the bend of the arroyo 2 miles south. "There," she said, "where the wash splits around the cottonwood stump. Midnight 2 nights from now. That's when the small wagons go. Finch's friend Harley is a driver sometimes. He brags when he forgets himself. If we meet them there, we'll learn whether the silver vein is a grave or a mouth." "Don't wait 2 nights," he said. "They could move sooner." "They won't," she said. "Night after next is when Gammon sits down with the depot clerk and drinks until they agree about what they never saw." He nodded. "The wire in his pocket weighed more. You'll need a reason to be south," she added. "If anyone asks, you're looking into stock stolen off Bowers Place. Let that rumor out tomorrow morning at Ned's. People believe anything if it hurts a man. Who owes them?" "What about you?" he asked. "You walk alone between here and the arroyo. Men will make their own stories." "I walked alone to Dodge Creek with nothing but a picture of a boy and hope," she said. "I can walk to an arroyo with less." "Don't fuss, Sheriff." Then softer. "I won't be alone. There are girls who see more than they sell. One will walk with me partway, and then turn back at the cottonwoods, and no one will think twice, because no one thinks of girls on roads at night unless they planned to take them off those roads. He had no words for that, or too many. He settled. For this, if anybody puts a hand on you, I'll break it. You'll have a lot of bones to keep track of, she said, no smile. Save your hands for the chain. A sound rose from below, then Finch's laugh, that small dog making. Itself big. Eli moved with it, as a hunter moves when a far sound becomes near. We should give them a show, Rosalind said. A what? A show. She crossed to him until they were close enough that an onlooker through a peephole would see what they had paid to see. She tilted her head, lowered her lashes, and set a hand on his chest with the careful press of a woman who has placed a hand like this many times and knows where it will be seen and how. If you walk out with your hat straight and your face like church, the wrong men will put the wrong pieces together. He didn't flinch. He let the role put its weight on him and stood it. What do I say? Nothing, she said. Men who pay for it rarely do. But you might laugh once on the landing, as if I told you a dirty joke about the governor. I don't know any. Pretend you do. Her hand lingered a half-second longer than performance required, or he imagined it did because he wanted. 2. Then she stepped away, smoothed the bed with an absent turn of the palm, and picked up the towel Lila had mentioned because even in war rooms, a woman had to be the one to remember towels. At the arroyo, she said, midnight. If I'm not there, wait 1 hour. If I'm still not there, go to Horsehead Bluff at dawn and follow the second trail. If you see a white shawl tied in the cottonwood, turn back and forget me. What if I won't? Then you'll join me under the ground, she said, and Samuel Vale will have to save us both. He touched the brim of his hat, a habit that had stayed housebroken despite long neglect. 2 nights, he said. 2 nights. They made the show. She said something low as he opened the door, a whisper that could be anything to ears. Below, and he laughed, short and surprised. On the landing, he touched her elbow, like a man feeling proprietary in the thin, ugly way men sometimes do. It felt like holding a lie in his hand. He let it go. Then he descended, all unhurried, the piano losing an argument with itself again, Finch tacking his laugh like a flag to the end of somebody else's sentence dot at the bottom. Ned's eyes were waiting at the bar, eyebrows up into his hair. Eli ignored them. Finch rose from his table with his toothpick and his little dog grin, but this time Eli didn't pause. He let his hip brush the man enough to turn him a fraction, enough to make a public decision about who moved who. People saw. People always saw. The room filed it away. Outside, the desert's dark found him quick. The wind at night tasted of gypsum and the thin promise of rain that would not come. He cut down the alley by habit, left at the barrel of ashes, and stepped into the back lot where the Blackhorn dumped what it couldn't sell. A wagon rolled past on the far street, axles complaining, canvas sides tied tight. No lanterns. 2. Men on the seat, coats too warm for the evening. The team's hooves struck rhythm on packed dirt. Tap, tap, weight the same rhythm Rosalind had been drumming on the rail. Eli crouched and pressed his fingers to the ground where the wagons' back wheel had cut a deeper line through dust. The tread had a nick in it, a missing triangle of iron that would print the same mark every rotation, like a man's peculiar handwriting. He smiled to himself without humor. Wheels wrote letters. Hills kept the mail. He stood and rolled his shoulders. Under the badge. The nickel star felt heavier again, but different now, less like a weight and more like a tool. He turned his face south toward the arroyo and told the dark what he intended to do. Samuel Vale, he said into the wind. I hear you. The town behind him kept its noise. The high window above the alley went dark, then flickered once, twice, 3 times in slow succession, before the curtain closed again. Signals. Counting. a language inside a language. Eli touched the brim of his hat to no one there and started toward the part of the map that had been written in a woman's careful hand and a boy's absence. The desert at midnight was a different country. The air cooled until it bit bone. Coyotes yipped somewhere past the arroyo, the sound rising like smoke and fading into the black. Eli Carter had ridden in night country before war patrols, cattle, drives, fugitive trails, but this night pressed tighter, as if the dark itself didn't want him moving. He waited at the cottonwood stump where the wash split, his horse tethered low among the sage. The moon hung thin, a blade in the sky. He crouched, fingers sifting the dry sand for fresh tracks. The wheel ruck was there deep, iron cut with that nick like a missing tooth. The same wagon he'd seen outside the Blackhorn. The track turned, north into the notch at Horsehead Bluff. He didn't move yet. She came without a sound, as if the dark had shaped her from itself. Rosalind Vale stepped out of the gulch shadow, shawl around her shoulders, hair braided back from her face. She carried no lantern. Her eyes gleamed the way some animal's eyes catch starlight. "You came," she whispered. "You thought I wouldn't?" "I thought you'd be wise," she said. "But I was hoping you'd be stubborn." Eli glanced at the path. 2 men on the seat, no lanterns. Same wheel as before. "I know." She pulled from her shawl a folded scrap one of her maps, lines, drawn careful, a woman's hand steady from hours of secret work. She tapped the faint trail marked at the bluff. "This is the way in. They don't risk the main road anymore. Too many questions when wagons keep heading toward a mine that's supposed to be dead." Eli studied the slope ahead. Rocks jutted like crooked teeth. The path wound through shadows deep enough to hide 100 men. "If they've got guards, we'll walk straight into their rifles." Rosalind's mouth tightened. "Then we walk soft. My brother's in there." The words. "Cut." Eli's hand brushed the star pinned to his vest. He'd worn it through ambushes, through false arrests, through town councils who saw the law as a broom to sweep dirt under rugs. But tonight it felt like tin against flesh useless, unless he backed it with something else. "Stay close," he said, "and if it comes to it, I don't run," she cut in. "Not anymore." They climbed the bluff. The ground shifted under their boots, shale sliding with every step. Eli kept his Colt loose in its holster, ears tuned for the scrape of steel or the click of a hammer cocked. No sound came but the hiss of wind down at the crest. The mine's black mouth opened below them. The old silver-veined shaft collapsed, condemned, forgotten by law, but not by men who made profit from shadows. Smoke curled from a side vent. The faint glimmer of lanterns swayed deeper inside. And then the sound changed out the clink of iron dragged across stone. Faint but steady, the rhythm of work done against will. Rosalind's hand clutched his sleeve, nails biting leather. "Do you hear it?" "I hear it." They crept down, hugging the wall of the cut. A guard stood at the entrance, rifle slung lazy across his shoulder. His hat brim dipped low, a cigarette glowing at the corner of his mouth. Eli moved fast. He slipped behind, seized the man's collar, and struck the back of his head against rock. The guard crumpled without a cry. Eli dragged him into shadow, stripped the cartridge belt, and pressed a finger to his lips. When Rosalind started to speak, inside, the air thickened. Damp stone, sweat, the copper tang of blood. The shaft timbers groaned as if remembering the cave-in that had once buried men alive. Lanterns swung on nails, their light painting long shadows across the walls. Eli and Rosalind pressed deeper, steps muffled by dust. The sound of chains grew louder, joined by coughs, murmurs, a faint scrape of shovels. Then they saw them. A cavern opened wide, ribbed with old supports. Dozens of figures hunched under the weight of picks and baskets. Men most of them gaunt, as scarecrows, faces hollowed by hunger and fear. A few were boys, not old enough to shave, shackles biting into their ankles. They moved in rhythm, a forced dance between hunger and the whip. Rosalind gasped. Her hands flew to her mouth. From the far side, a voice barked. "Faster, you dogs! Rock don't dig itself." A foreman stepped into the light. Cass Roke Eli knew him from wanted sheets long ago. A brute of a man, beard black as coal dust, a whip coiled loose in his fist. 2 guards flanked him, rifles ready. Roke spat into the dirt. "Another load by dawn, or half of you won't see the sun. Railroad's hungry, and I don't feed dead weight." The whip cracked. A boy stumbled, dropped his basket. Roke swung again. Rosalind broke. "Samuel!" Her cry echoed like a shot dot heads. Turned, the prisoners froze. And from the crowd, a boy stepped forward, chains clinking. His face was thinner, his shoulders narrower than a Lockett portrait, but the scar above his brow was the same. "Samuel Vale, Rosie?" His voice cracked on the name dot in that instant. The mine erupted. Guards shouted, rifles swung. Eli's Colt cleared leather and roared. One guard dropped. The other scrambled behind a post. Prisoners scattered, chains rattling like a storm. Roke's whip lashed across the air, then he drew his revolver. "Kill them both." He bellowed. Eli fired again. The shot ripped Roke's hat from his head, but the brute kept coming. Rosalind darted forward, slamming her. Shoulder into her brother, knocking him to the ground to shield him. Bullets sparked off stone. A lantern shattered, plunging half the cavern into shadow. Eli ducked behind a beam, reloaded by feel. His heart thundered in his chest. Not fear, but rage. Rage at chains. Rage at men who called flesh property. Rage at a world where a woman had to sell herself just to buy a rumor of her brother's life. He came out firing. One guard fell. Roke cursed and swung his revolver, the muzzle flashing wild. Eli's third shot took the whip clean out of his hand. The fourth struck his shoulder, spinning him. Roke crashed against the wall, blood painting the rock. Silence fell, broken only by the rattle of chains and the ragged breath of freed men. Rosalind knelt in the dust, arms locked around her brother. Samuel clutched her back, his voice muffled. In her dress. "I knew you'd come," he sobbed. Eli stood over them, smoke curling from his Colt. His chest heaved. He looked at the prisoners' men and boys staring at him with wide, hollow eyes. Some still held picks, not knowing if they were tools or weapons anymore. "You're free," Eli said, voice rough. "But we've got to move fast, before more come." No one moved, not yet. The weight of chains lingered, heavier than iron. And Eli knew, in the pit of his gut, that killing Roke wasn't the end. It was only the first cut in a wound that would bleed across all of Dodge Creek, because Rosalind was right. The silver vein wasn't a grave. It was a mouth, and it had only just begun to spit out its secrets. The mine never went quiet all the way. Even after Cass Roke bled into the rock and the guards lay still, the chains rattled on men's ankles, as if the iron itself hadn't gotten the message. Fear clung to the prisoners like dust, and for a long breath nobody moved. Eli Carter holstered his Colt and let his voice carry. "Pick your tools. Smash the locks." A man with gray stubble and a miner's shoulders blinked at him, then lifted his pick and brought it down on the nearest shackle. Iron rang sharp against stone. The lock split. The sound broke whatever spell held them. Soon, the cavern filled with the clamor of chains falling to the floor like shed skins. Rosalind tore at Samuel's manacle with her bare hands until the pin gave. She wrapped him in her shawl, whispering his name again and again like a prayer. Samuel clung to her, half boy, half ghost. Move, Eli ordered. No time. He led them through the tunnels, the lantern light jumping wild across faces long starved of hope. Twice they heard boots pounding above more guards, men roused by the shots. Eli pushed them faster, up the narrow shaft where cold night air seeped down. When they burst out into the gulch, the stars seemed too bright for men who had lived too. Long underground dot, but freedom came with gunfire. Shadows at the bluff shouted and opened fire, muzzle flashes strabbing the dark. Prisoners scattered, diving into the rocks. Eli dropped to one knee, returned fire, and shouted, "Run south, to the wash." "Don't stop." Rosalind dragged Samuel toward the cottonwood stump. A bullet ripped the shawl from her shoulder, but she didn't break stride. Men fled in every direction, stumbling but moving, like a herd that finally scented open range. Eli covered them, one shot at a time, until his Colt clicked empty. Then he rose and ran, boots slamming the shale, the slope sliding beneath him. A round seared past his ear. Another struck stone at his heel. He dove into the wash beside them, breath ragged, and felt Rosalind's hand grab his arm. "They're scattering," she gasped. "They'll be hunted down." "They'll be harder to catch scattered," Eli said. "We take Samuel, we get him safe, and we find the rest." But in his gut, he knew some would not live till dawn. By sunrise, Dodge Creek was buzzing like a nest struck with a stick. Ranchers muttered in doorways, gamblers whispered over cards, and the depot clerk rode hard out of town, bound for the territorial seat with dust smoking off his horse's hooves. Eli left Samuel in the care of Ned Briscoe, a barkeep who swore. By his mother's grave, the boy would be hidden in the cellar. Rosalind kissed her brother's head and promised she'd be back before night. Samuel clung to her sleeve until she pried his hand free. Then Eli walked up Main Street with Rosalind at his side. He felt the town's eyes on them, their stares heavy, their whispers sharp. Every soul in Dodge Creek knew something had happened, out by the mine, and every soul knew whose name was tied to it. At the sheriff's office, a rider waited. Dusty coat, hat low, papers in hand, government seals stamped in red wax. He handed Eli the envelope without a word. Eli broke it open on. The steps, inside. Your badge is no longer required. Effective immediately. You are relieved of duty. By order of the territorial governor. The words were neat, final, and cold as the gallows beam. A silence spread down the street, as if everyone had been waiting for this moment. Men spat in the dust. Women turned their faces. The two rail hands from the saloon leaned against a post and grinned with small dog teeth. Rosalind stood stiff beside him, her jaw set. "They're not even pretending." Eli crumpled the letter in his fist. For a year, he had carried the star as if it meant something more than metal. He had buried men with prayers, broken fights with his fists, stood between the weak and the hungry. And now, with one slip of paper, the law had folded him up and thrown him away. What now? Rosalind asked. He pulled the badge from his vest. The nickel caught the morning sun, bright for a moment, before he let it fall. It hit the dust with a dull ring and lay there, half buried. "The law don't live here," he said. Never did. That night, they met in the back of the Blackhorn, not in the noisy bar or the painted rooms upstairs, but in the storeroom where barrels of whiskey sweated in the dark. A dozen men waited, miners, ranch hands, a cook from the depot, even one of the saloon girls. Faces that had seen chains and didn't intend to see them again. Eli laid his Colt on the table. Rosalind laid her map beside it. "This is what they're running out of the silver vein," Eli said. "Men, boys, lives sold for labor." "They'll come for us," one miner muttered. "They already are," Rosalind answered. Her eyes blazed. "In the lamplight, my brother is free, but there are more." Every day wagons roll, and every day somebody's child disappears. If we turn our faces, we may as well swing the whip ourselves. Silence held the room, thick and heavy. Then the gray-stubbled miner, who had broken the first shackle, spoke. Then we fight. One by one, the others nodded. Eli met Rosalind's eyes. She wasn't smiling, but her face carried something fiercer, a resolve sharper than any blade. "Paid for me," she said quietly, echoing the words from their first night. "Not with coin, with your name, with your badge. Now finish it." Eli looked at the faces around the table, men and women who had nothing but the will to stand. He thought of the boy clutching a locket portrait. He thought of the letter in his pocket, the badge in the dust, and he realized what shattered him. Most wasn't losing the law. It was knowing the law had never been his to begin with. He holstered his Colt. "All right," he said. "We finish." It. Outside, Dodge Creek slept uneasy, the town unaware that its reckoning had already begun.